Hey everyone, I'm Kevin with Victory 4x4, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to install our skid system on your 100 series Land Cruiser. So the first step before you can actually get your engine skid in place is going to be to install your diff drop cross member. Now, as you can obviously see, we've already got one in place that was done previously during the R&D and prior modifications. So the one you get is going to be pretty similar to this. It's going to look a lot like this, except this lower flange is going to be all the way across at this same height, not up here. It's going to mount in place the exact same way using these 4 mounting bolts, and then accommodate this driver's side diff mount over here. So basically what you need to do to get this installed is you're going to support the diff from underneath. Then you'll remove these 4 bolts as well as the driver's side diff mount bolt from the factory cross member. Drop that down out of place, and then you'll need to take this rear bolt on the passenger side, move it to the front with our diff drop spacers up top, and then using the supplied bolt, reinstall that into the rear, again with a spacer up here. Once you have those in place, you can come over here, slide the new cross member in, get these bolts lined up, and get this driver's side diff mount bolt through that cross member. So once you get all that hardware loosely installed, you can go ahead and tighten these up, tighten all your diff mounting bolts, and then we'll move up to the front to start installing that engine skid. So real quick, we jump to the front side of the differential here, and we just want to show you this is kind of what you're going to have once you get the spacer installed above this differential mount. So here on this lower cross member, just in front of the radiator, you're going to take your 3/8 by 3 inch bolts. You're going to want a washer on these. You're using a 3/8 flange nut up top, and you're just going to fish this in above these 2 large bottom holes. Go ahead and start the bolt into the nut. And then we want to leave these loose just like that so we can slide the slots in the skid over top of these washers. So with these bolts hanging, you can slide the front slots of your skid up over these washers and in place to line up these mounting holes on the outside. So out here, you'll be using the provided 14 mil bolts with washers. Go ahead and start 2 of these on each side by hand. So once you have all that front hardware started by hand, that'll support the weight of the skid so that we can jump to the back and show you how that installs back there. So if you're only installing the engine skid, at this point you want to put in the rear mounting hardware. However, if you're installing the transmission skid as well, you want to get that slid in place over top of this engine skid before installing this hardware and tightening everything up. I'll show you how these go in real quick, and then we'll work on our trans skid. So back here, you're just using a 1/2 inch serrated flange nut and a 1/2 inch button head bolt. The nut you can drop down over the top of your cross member and get it lined up with the mounting hole. 1 on each side here. And then you may have to reach over the top again just to hold that nut while you line it up with this button head bolt. And then once both of these are started, you can grab a 5/16 hex to tighten them up. So here on your mid transmission skid, the narrower end with 2 mounting slots is going to be the front. You want to raise that up and get it slid over top of this engine skid. You can align these mounting slots here, and then using the same button head hardware that you would have bolted the back half of this skid in with, you can capture both the front of this mid skid and the rear of the engine skid. So here at the rear of the skid, you're going to have 3 main mounting slots. Those are going to correlate with 3 holes up here in this factory transmission cross member. Now, obviously these holes, as you see them, are going to be pretty small. They're like 1/4 inch roughly. You're going to need to line the skid up with those smaller holes to confirm you're drilling in the right location, and then open those up to 7/16 to accommodate a 1/2 inch self-threading bolt. So as I kind of already mentioned, we need to drill this out to 7/16. I'm going to start this and kind of step my way up with this step drill. This is too tall, so it'll hit the top before I get all the way to the size I need. So I'll get as far as I can and then switch to a full-size 7/16 drill bit to finish out these holes. Then we can just follow that same process on the other 2 holes. So after you have all 3 of those mounting holes drilled out, you're going to want to grab the 1/2 inch self-threading bolts from your kit, a 3/4 socket, and you can run these in. So if you're stopping your install here at the mid skid at this point, you can install the other 2 1/2 inch self-threading bolts back here, tighten all those up, and then go back to the front edge of this skid and tighten up that mounting hardware as well. Now, if you are jumping in to a TK skid install, you're going to need to be able to pull these back out so that you can slide that TK skid in over top of the mid skid and install those both together with these mounting bolts. So to get started with our TK skid, we're going to begin by installing this cross member. First step there is to grab the 3/8 serrated flange nut. It'll slide over the top of this flange and align with this hole here just below the torsion bar key. So then you'll push this cross member up tight, grab a 3/8 bolt and washer, and get that started into that flange nut to locate the cross member. Then we can go do the same thing over on the other side. Now once you have that located with the 2 3/8 bolts, you'll need to come out here to these 2 outer mounting holes, drill those out to 7/16, and tighten in 2 1/2 inch self-threading bolts. Now we already did the front bolt on each side during our R&D process, so I'm just going to start these so that I make sure my back hole when it's drilled is aligned with our existing holes. Then I'll come back here and drill these out. Then use a 3/4 socket to run in these 1/2 inch bolts. Now I can go over and do the same thing on the other side. Then we're just going to leave all this hardware loose for now until we get the TK skid and all its hardware loosely installed, and then we'll come back and tighten this up. Alright, so now you can grab your TK skid. The front will have the 3 mounting slots that align with the slots in this mid skid. You can place it over the top of the back of that skid and then raise it up to the cross member. Then you just need to align these front slots with the pre-drilled holes that you just did in that factory cross member and start installing those 1/2 inch self-threading bolts up front. Now with the front hardware in place, we can jump back here to the rear of this skid where you'll be installing a 1/2 inch button head bolt on each side along with a serrated flange nut. So the nut just goes over top of this cross member. The bolt can be pushed up through the bottom. And then go ahead and finger tighten that for now. Come over here and do the same thing. Then we can grab our 5/16 hex to tighten these in place. So once you have your holes tapped out using the 1/2" self-threading bolt, you can go back and pull these out. And then you'll replace them with a 1/2" button head using a 5/16 hex. And that'll just finish off this nice clean look and smooth out the bottom of the skid system. And then be sure to go back and tighten in the cross member to the frame. Now if you were installing the full skid system as we've done here, you can go back and hit all your hardware from the rear all the way back up to the front to make sure everything's tight. So here on these front 2 bolts, when you go to tighten them up, just a little tip, you're going to want to pull down on the washer as long as you can, basically, as you spin this 3/8 bolt up. And that's just helping that flange nut on the top grab into that cross member so that you can tighten this up. We'll do the same thing here on this side. Get it drawn up tight to the skid. And then snug both of these up. Now lastly, you can come over here and install this access door using the 5/16 button heads and serrated flange nuts. This should easily slide into place. Apply the nut back here. Do the same thing down here on the bottom. And then grab a 3/16 hex to tighten these up. Once you get that tightened up, your skid install should be complete. So if you have any questions about these skids or any other product we offer here at Victory 4x4, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can send us an email at info@victory4x4.com or give us a phone call at 269-459-8447.